Hello everybody, this is Coach Shafto. Today we are on IXL 6th grade, and we're learning how to solve one-step equations with decimals and fractions. We have already learned the process for how to do this, but we're going to go ahead and apply it with some more challenging numbers. As you're working on these problems, your goal is to get to 70, and if you want to challenge yourself, you can get to 100. Other assignments can be found on Google Classroom. As we look at this first problem, we notice that it's a subtraction problem, but we also notice that we have some decimals involved. And so essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the problem. Z minus 2 is equal to 7.6. And since it's a subtraction problem, I need to use inverse operations. And I'm trying to make a zero pair. So I'm going to add 2, and this makes a zero pair, which then goes away. But I can't just put it on one side of the equal sign. I have to put it on both sides. So I'm going to add 2 on the other side as well to make sure that my equation is balanced. This leaves me with z by itself, and then 7 plus 2 is 9, and then that's z equals 9.6. Next problem has fractions. It says, write your answer as a fraction or as a whole or mixed number. So I have w plus 1/8 is equal to 3/8. As I'm looking at this, the first thing that I'm thinking is that, okay, these have common denominators. And this helps me because it's an addition problem. The next thing I need to think about is how can I make a zero pair by using inverse operations? The opposite of plus 1/8 is negative 1/8. So now I have a positive 1/8 and a negative 1/8, and it goes to 0. This leaves me with w by itself on the left side of the equal sign. On this side, I also need to do minus 1/8. And the reason for that is because whatever I do on one side, I need to do the same on the other side in order to keep my equation balanced. 3/8 minus 1/8 is going to be 2/8, and 2/8 is the same as 1/4. Next problem has multiplication, and it just says 1.5 times 3. And so this should be easy. I'm going to use a calculator. 1.5 times 3, and I get 4.5. Next problem is a little bit more challenging. I have b times 5 is equal to 1/2. So this is challenging because I'm multiplying by something to get 1/2. So if I look at it, I need to multiply by the reciprocal, or since I'm multiplying, I need to do the inverse of multiplying, which is dividing. I'm going to divide by using a fraction bar. Here I have a 5 in the numerator and a 5 in the denominator, and those will cancel out, leaving a b by itself. Since I divided by 5 on the left side, I need to divide by 5 on the right side. There's a problem though, because I have a fraction on top, which means I want to change my denominator into a fraction as well. So this gives me 1/2 divided by 5/1, because this fraction bar means divide. I'm going to do keep change reciprocal, and this will be 1/2 times 1/5. And this gives me an answer, which is going to be 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 5 is 10. So my answer here is 1/10. Next problem says I have C divided by 4/7. C divided by 4/7 is equal to 7. The opposite of dividing is multiplying. So I'm going to multiply times 4/7. And this will create 1, because when I divide and multiply by the same thing, it gives me 1 whole. It's hard to see because it's not in numerator and denominator format, but that's what it should give. This gives me C by itself. And since I multiplied by 4/7 on the left side, I need to do the same thing on the right side. I have a 7 in the numerator and a 7 in the denominator of this multiplication problem. Those will cancel out to give me 1 whole. And this just leaves me, if there was a 1 as my denominator, this leaves me with 4 and 1. So my answer is 4. Now, if you didn't understand my canceling, you could have done 7 times 4 is 28. 1 times 7 is 7. And 28 divided by 7 is 4. The next problem is a little bit more challenging because we have fractions on both ends. So I have 2/7 times y is equal to 4/5. Remember, when we're multiplying by a fraction, we are going to change it and multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to do times 7/2. And what this does is it gives me a 2 in the numerator and the 2 in the denominator. So those give me a whole. And then it gives me a 7 in the numerator and a 7 in the denominator. So it gives me a whole. So by multiplying by the reciprocal, it flips it, and then it gets rid of all of my numbers. So I'm left with a y by itself. Since I multiplied times 7/2 on the left side, I need to do the same thing on the right side. When I multiply these, I'm going to end up with 4 times 7 is 28, and 5 times 2 is 10. I can simplify by dividing, and it gives me 14/5. The last problem I'm going to do is r divided by 8/9 is equal to 9/10. And so when I see this, if you remember, we want to do the inverse. So this is division, so I want to multiply. So I'm going to do times 8/9. And really what this would look like is I would have 8/9. And if I divided, I would do keep, change, flip, and I'd get 9/8. So you see, I end up with a 9 in the numerator, 9 in the denominator, and an 8 in the numerator, 8 in the denominator, and they all go to 1 whole. I can't show that here, and so I'm just going to cancel it out, and I trust that you'll understand this concept. I'm left in an r by itself. The problem, though, is I have to keep my equation balanced. So since I multiplied by 8/9 here, I have to multiply by 8/9 on the right side as well. I have a 9 in the numerator, I have a 9 in the denominator, so those will cancel out, and I'm left with 8/10, which if I simplify it by dividing by 2, it gives me 4/5. Remember that your goal is to get to 70, and that if you want to challenge yourself, you can go all the way to 100.